Henry Elkus became the founder and CEO of Helena when he was 21 years old, a precocious age to start anything of the scope that Helena has become. Members include 4-star generals, Fortune 100 CEOs, Nobel Peace Prize and Science laureates, Academy Award winners, former CIA directors, leading academicians, NGO leaders, and more. Helena identifies potential solutions to critical global problems and directly implements them through individual projects. Please welcome to our stage, Henry Elkus.
About 6.5 years ago, I was having what you might call a 1/5 life crisis. I was a sophomore in college, and I was thinking about what problems I would face the rest of my life in my generation. And I was meditating on something I thought was very unique about this particular generation, about how problems come about. And I think there's 3 unique things. We're seeing problems arise in the world at a faster speed than ever before. You know, this would have been a shocking thing to say, many years ago, but of course we've all been through COVID. While they're rising faster than ever before, they're rising at global scale. The Black Death didn't jump the Atlantic Ocean, but COVID did. And then finally, we are mixing that speed and global scale with, unfortunately, exponential technologies and problems. I think a lot of you will remember the first example that all 3 of these things came together, the Manhattan Project. And here's, of course, the Trinity bomb the night before the first test. So sitting in college, 19 years old, thinking about this, I realized that we're actually about to have multiple of these issues occur during our lifetime. Some of them are positive and some of them are negative. But we're actually in a generation of Robert Oppenheimers. We're having Manhattan projects in our neurotechnology. We're having Manhattan projects with CRISPR and genetic engineering. We're advancing nuclear in scary and very optimistic ways. And artificial intelligence is also having its renaissance, but there's again positive and negative exponentialities to this. Artificial intelligence is allowing us to know ourselves, is understanding ourselves better than we know ourselves. It's able to kill us autonomously, and it's able to fool us without us knowing, with things like deepfakes. So while this renaissance of exponential, scaled, and fast problem generation is occurring, who are we entrusting to solve these problems? And it's going to happen during the next 50 years, which I developed a belief that we could have the most consequential decisions that humanity's ever made during my generation. And what do we do about it? Well, we rely on institutions to solve our problems. However, institutions haven't really changed their models to follow this rapid rise in how problems arise. We still rely on the Westphalian system to understand what a country is. We still rely on a constitution in the 18th century to govern our country. So have we actually paid the attention to update the internal structures of our institutions to address the societal problems that we're going to face? And I think in my youthful delusion, the answer was basically no, and we need to do something about it.
Well, if so, how do you sustain a business model?
And I'm reminded, of one example of this when Zuckerberg was at Congress, in which you saw kind of somebody overseeing an exponential technology at global scale at fast speed, trying to actually interface with one of the modern institutions we rely on. So I thought this was an interesting tidbit of the problem.
Well, if so, how do you sustain a business model in which users don't pay for your service?
Senator, we run ads.
I see.
So perhaps I'm cherry picking, but these are the institutions that we're relying on to address these problems. And if we can't understand the business model of something like Facebook, how are we going to address some of the issues that we're outlining here? So sitting in college, I was thinking deeply about this, and I wanted to dedicate my life to this problem, about the design of institutions that we will have to rely on to address the societal problems of the 21st century. And I became convinced that we needed a model that was a little bit different. So again, kind of in some youthful delusion, I said, why don't I go build one of those institutions and actually try my shot at it? And the idea was that it would be a parallel vehicle where you would have nonprofit projects aside for-profit projects. Because we can't keep siloing implementations of solutions just in the policy realm, just in the nonprofit and philanthropic sphere, and just in the for-profit sphere. Why don't we try to do something that actually thinks about these as horizontal? And of course, having no capital, having no resources to actually come up with these solutions and implement them, what if we could actually recruit a group of people that represented all the assets necessary to do this? The ideas, the diligence capabilities, the capital, and the operational capabilities. And what if we call these people members? What if we bring all three of these things into one organization and then run that? Could that be a model for how the 21st century addresses societal problems? So this was the idea. And we decided to call it Helena for two reasons. Helena means bright, shining light. And I thought if you were going to run an organization that attempted to address societal problems, maybe call it something that was a North Star itself. And then the second reason was that the URL was available and was very cheap. So here I am, sophomore year, kind of pitching the idea of the organization for the first time. And the first step was, how do I get these members to join so I can get these assets to then actually do the work? So I actually wrote out a spreadsheet with 4,000 names. The X and Y axis were off. And I thought, well, the internet exists. I could actually just email the people that I wanted to join. So I actually emailed about 4,000 people, world leaders of many different stripes. As you can imagine, I got a very low response rate with my 80-page memo about why I was going to build an organization that, you, four-star general, needs to join to help me solve the world's problems. But I ended up getting one person to join. Very luckily, I asked my high school math teacher. He said no. But I ended up getting Myron Scholes as the first member, the Nobel Prize winner in economics, as some of you may remember from Black-Scholes theory. Fast forward about 6.5 years, we now have about 150 members, four-star generals, 2 former CIA directors, Nobel Prize winners in science, billionaire entrepreneurs and finance folks, human rights activists. And what we do is we actually convene them all the time around the world, sometimes every single day in small groups. This is an example of a Helena meeting at our LA office. And the meetings are just like this. They're very informal. Not everybody wears bow ties. And we're able to bring a really intergenerational group of people together, step one, to just discuss, like, okay, what are we going to do? What are ideas that we can actually implement in the world without structure? And the idea is that we would take these concepts that emanate from the meetings and then actually concretize them. And these people that you're seeing don't just represent the ideation, they can actually help us execute. So this was the very beginning of the organization, and we actually started it just as a nonprofit and started to execute these projects via 501c3 structure. We thought maybe at some point we'd been able to get the credibility to actually add a parallel for-profit and achieve this dream of doing everything side by side. So the nonprofit now has many different projects, but I wanted to highlight a couple for you today. Some of you may remember this cover of the New York Times in 2019. This was one of our first projects we did via the nonprofit. And I think it won't be a controversial statement to say that we're experiencing a broken civic system in our country right now. There's division that we've never seen before. And we need to do something about it. We need to have a fix to some of the tools that address and coax our democracy. So we had a crazy idea, which is, what if we could actually get a fully representative sample of the entire United States in one place and figure out what Americans actually believe about the most critical issues facing our country and get accurate data on this and then do something about it? So we started with 6 million Americans at random. And through an amazing partnership with Stanford University and the University of Chicago, we actually winnowed that down to 2 groups. The first was a group of 523 people, and the second was a group of 800 people. And we took that group of 523 people and we flew them to one place. We rented out one of the largest hotels in the United States, the Gaylord Texan Hotel outside of Dallas. And we flew everybody there for 3 straight days. And before they arrived, we gave them an extensive poll on what they believed about the top critical issues that were actually facing the country for the 2020 election. And that 800-person group that was also represented the entire country, we didn't bring. So we first started with this amazing group in small group sessions of 12, 13 people at a time. And you can see these amazing photos from the event. You had to be there, sitting there at the side. It brought tears to my eyes to actually see a representative sample of our country. And these small group sessions generated some of the most insightful questions we had ever heard. At the end of the small group sessions, however, we brought them together to the most representative room in American history all at once. And here's what it looked like. On stage, we had the presidential candidates, former White House chiefs of staff from both parties, former DOD heads from both parties. They were actually tasked with answering the questions from this representative sample of the American people. And it was just fascinating to see. So we ended up publishing the data, and the data was breakthrough. We actually saw up to a 40% change in both directions across the sample. So Republicans went to the center, Democrats went to the center, Republicans softened on issues like immigration, Democrats learned what taxes were, and they became a little bit more conservative. And it got a lot of attention. I think we achieved a cultural moment in our country. President Obama tweeted out about it. We were on the cover of the New York Times. We were on the top page of CNN. And we were able to actually demonstrate that, hey, wait a second, you actually can do democracy right. You can have people respect each other. You can have people come together and ascertain what the will of the American people is, this crazy idea that the Founding Fathers said that a democracy should be founded upon. But that actually wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. We saw countries actually end up adopting this model. So afterwards, the country of Chile and the country of Iceland actually were undergoing constitutional changes. And they did this deliberative poll in which they brought together a representative sample of Chile and of Iceland. And this actually helped change their constitutions. We then did another American One Room on climate. This was during COVID, and it was the largest deliberative poll, the most representative sample of any country ever brought together in history, 900 plus people. And we did this online with an AI moderator, in which we were able to do it all over the United States, all simultaneously. This again was a huge moment. We actually brought the data to COP26, the UN Climate Summit, because we actually had a representation of what Americans would actually vote for. Are we going to vote for carbon dividend proposals? Are we going to vote for carbon taxes? We were able to answer these questions. We released the data with Harvard. We had an amazing partnership with the Harvard School of Public Health. And I thought this was a fascinating anecdote I just wanted to share. This is one of the women that was in our sample, and it kind of concretizes the sentiment that we had in this amazing group.
If you don't step back from being a politician, just be a person. Just be what do you see as far as the future for your children? What do you see the future for your grandchildren? Look at it from humanity's perspective and not from a political perspective.
So we're actually going to be doing this project again, even at a larger scale, hopefully with hundreds of thousands of people at a time, and I'll keep you all posted about that. But I want to move to another project we did on the nonprofit side. In conversations with some of the Helena members of the intelligence community, we realized that the electrical grid is insanely vulnerable, and it shouldn't be. We're vulnerable to cyber attacks, because this is actually the largest machine in the world, is the North American electrical grid. We're vulnerable to extreme weather, which is not going to be a surprise to any of you who live in Texas. Floods. But there's actually something even scarier, which is that the sun, I don't know if you guys know this, emits solar flares that threaten our grid called coronal mass ejections. And the funny thing about this is you can actually solve this problem with legislation, except it just hadn't been done. So we decided to take our hand at it. First, our amazing COO and executive director, Sam Feinberg, did a TED Talk on this, which didn't get much attention at the very beginning, and they got millions of views, because he talked about some of the issues that could happen to the grid, and of course it ended up actually happening in Texas, for some of you that were there. So inside of our nonprofit, working with these incredible Helena members, we actually wrote and passed legislation, both at the state level, and then through a cooperation with the intelligence community. We did a summit with folks at the CIA and other organizations in Arlington, Virginia. We actually drafted and helped pass presidential executive orders on this issue, releasing quite a significant amount of funding towards the problem. And this is just basic stuff, putting surge protectors and Faraday cages on the most critical parts of the grid. So here's one of the Helena members actually passing unanimously a bill in the state of California, bipartisan. Then when COVID hit, we did a project in which we realized that there was two issues happening. The first is there was a major supply chain breakdown on critical protective equipment called PPE, and that hospitals actually weren't getting it because the 3Ms of the world had run out of their supply. So we ended up actually sending an email to all of the Helena members. In about 2 days, we raised $20 million. And we actually ran a merchant bank inside of our nonprofit. We diligenced, bought, and sold 37 million units of PPE. And then during the early moments of COVID, we actually routed that at cost to hospitals, got the money back, and did it again. And here I am talking to the chief White House correspondent at CBS about it. But while we were doing this, we actually became one of the largest buyers of PPE. And I was in this new business. And I said, wait a second, how do we figure out where to actually take this stuff? And there wasn't a great answer. So our members actually built a AI-based predictive analytic model, county by county, hospital by hospital, across the entire United States. It was so successful, overseeing so many different transactions, that we actually gave it to the US government through CRADA agreements with the Air Force and the Army, who ended up using it as one of their official pathways to respond to COVID. Here's what it looks like. You're able to see at a hospital by hospital level exactly what these hospital needs, and the exact number they need, and then a prediction of what they will need next week. And philanthropists could actually directly, as well as government institutions, just press a button and then route their capital or their resources there. One final example of another project we're working on farther into the future is actually floating cities. The United States, the UN states that by 2050 there will be 1.2 billion people that will move. And where are they going to go? Right now there's countries that are pushing sand into the ocean, but we don't think that's good. So we're actually the lead strategic partner of an organization called Oceanics, which is building the world's first floating city. And this is actually beginning construction now in Busan, South Korea. And this is a bit of what the floating city looks like. What's interesting about this model is that it uses less water per person than the Democratic Republic of Congo per person. It's energy neutral, completely energy efficient. We think this is actually a model for how the world will live in the future, so that you can live symbiotically with the ocean. Oh, here's an example of some articles about the signing and ratification in Busan. So about 4.5, 5 years in, which is about 18 months ago, we actually ended up starting the for-profit that we always wanted to start. And the idea was the exact same thing. What if we could actually identify solutions to societal problems that required the for-profit world to scale, due diligence on them, and then actually pair capital with our kind of quote-unquote king-making resources from the Helena members and actually do something about it? So I want to give you a couple examples of this. Grid-scale energy storage, storing energy from renewable generation like wind and solar, is one of the Achilles heels of transitioning the world to electric energy and solving climate change. We found an amazing approach that actually doesn't use lithium-ion, rare earth minerals, battery chemistry, anything that blows up to do it. And it's rudimentary science. You actually take large bricks, and then you lift them into the air, potential energy, and then you release them down to release that energy back into the grid, kinetic energy, to store and release that energy. What's interesting is that you can actually make these bricks, and this is through a proprietary partnership with Cemex, out of remediated toxic waste. So when we're retiring coal plants, you have billions and billions of dollars of this stuff called fly ash and coal ash, which is killing people in Southeast Asia. What do we do about it? We can actually get paid to take this material in, build it into our bricks, and then those same utilities that are paying us to take that waste material are paying this company again to store and release their energy. It's an amazing concept. Here's the first system that they built in Switzerland. 6-headed crane, very clunky, but this is actually cheaper and the same level of round-trip efficiency as lithium-ion. It's an amazing structure. Now the company has moved on to its next-generation system, which kind of looks like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of single-story elevators next to one another, but it's the exact same concept. So we invested actually $21 million into this company before they built their first system. We helped them every step of the way, and they went public on the New York Stock Exchange 2 weeks ago for $1.6 billion. It was an amazing outcome for us and kind of a very first case study of the for-profit model of using this amazing group of members and actually applying them to addressing societal problems to work. I want to give a couple other examples of the for-profit work. Plastic is one of the biggest issues. We have plastic in our bloodstream. I think a lot of you guys don't know this. So what if we could actually find a replacement for plastic, and excuse my French, that was non-bullshit, something that actually didn't harm the environment, but was the same cost as plastic or less? And we did. We found this amazing company that could take plastic. Let's just say you're done with it, you put in your dishwasher, and it goes away, completely gone. So it's fully biodegradable and water soluble. And again, this doesn't require that you pay 3 or 4 times your plastic, which nobody will do as cool as this is. So this company has jumped 7.5x in its value since we invested $12.5 million into the company a little bit over last year. And this company can make products across the spectrum. We're actually making pill cups. There's 800 million pill cups sold per year. You go to your CVS, we can make that out of this material. Everything to your golf balls, golf sticks, forks and spoons and knives. Here's one of my personal favorites. The very first project that Helena did via the nonprofit was actually supporting the launch and scale of the first time that humans could actually build a machine to suck carbon dioxide out of the air commercially, which is essential if we're going to solve climate change, because even if we press the button to stop all CO2 emissions from getting in the atmosphere, we have such an excess that is already in the air that we need to remove it at exponential scale. And we're simply not doing that because it's too damn expensive, just like it was too damn expensive to make solar and wind work in the 80s or 90s. So you guys are smart business people. How do you get the cost curve down of a technology? You need more non-dilutive R&D funding to go back to the process. So we can't just take this carbon out of the air and stuff it underground, which is being done now. We need to turn it into materials. So what type of material could we make out of carbon? Well, I'm thinking of something that is especially beautiful that is made out of pure carbon, and we're actually doing it. We're making diamonds out of this atmospheric carbon. Flawless, pure diamonds. You put this under a machine and it tests as a mined diamond. So this is not a synthetic diamond, not a man-made diamond. with two sweaty guys over a machine using petroleum as an input. We're taking that pure carbon out of the air and then turning it into diamonds. And this was on the cover of Forbes yesterday. We got one of the top articles read on Vogue. And we're creating a real diamonds company. Not just on the commercial side, although it makes a beautiful commercial piece. And if any of you are getting married, I know we're all thinking about that these days. You could all buy diamonds out of the atmosphere. But a lot of you guys may not know this. There's actually a larger industry than just commercial luxury consumer diamonds. Diamonds are actually used in some of the most tough industrial cases, like semiconductors. Actually, all of these screens are polished by crystals and diamonds. All of your watches are polished by that. So what if we could rid the supply chain of mined diamonds and replace them with carbon capture diamonds, where every single carat of one of these removes 20 tons of CO2 out of the atmosphere? So if Randy doesn't kill me, I'm going to go over by 1 or 2 minutes just to show you a couple more of these projects. Another company we invested in, partnered in, is called Heliogen. One of the most carbon emittive things we do is create industrial heat. How do we fuel our cement practices? How do we fuel our molding practices? We need heat. Heliogen uses AI-controlled mirrors that optimize their relationship to the sun to actually create heat that is actually 1,500 degrees Celsius or higher. We invested $15 million in next-generation nuclear fusion, a company called Commonwealth Fusion Systems that we think has cracked the tokamak reactor approach to create boundless free energy. And I'll give you a final example of something we're really proud of that we actually just started 2 weeks ago. There's a advanced artificial intelligence company that Google bought that is most known for actually the AlphaGo achievement, beating the world's top Go player, which is one of the most complex games in the world. A lot of you remember Garry Kasparov getting beaten by Deep Blue. This is the next generation version of that. I think trillions or quadrillions of different permutations, and the AI was able to beat a human at it. But this same technology did something different that is a little less sexy, but I think is very sexy. They went back to Google and they said, hey, Google, 1% of all the world's CO2 emissions are just computer servers, and you own the world's largest collection of these computer servers. We're going to build an AI for you so that we run all of the heating and cooling across your entire server population for you. And they did, and it reduced Google's heating bill by 50%. So you can kind of see where the AI comes on and comes off. So imagine a business that sells a piece of software that replaces humans to control the most complex, mission-critical industrial equipment in the world. And it does it cheaper and more efficiently, and it saves you 50% of your money. These are the types of implementations we're doing on the for-profit side because they can harness the power of capitalism. Just to end here, one of the dreams that we have beyond all of this is to actually run a completely circular organization in which our nonprofit can scale along with our for-profit, and we can actually become our own philanthropists. We no longer have to pass the hat in order to raise the money on the nonprofit side. We can actually make the money ourselves and run a completely self-sustaining organization. And my dream over the next 50 years is to build the world's top and most efficacious organization that actually solves societal problems in partnership with some of the world's top leaders. And that's what I want to dedicate the rest of my life to. And we're now 6.5 years in. I would love any of your support, and just come up to me after and talk about it if you'd like. Thank you, guys.